2, 1. This is the 8-9 combo. I'm Brett McKay and Harry Jones. It has arrived. The Rugby Championship is here.
How's it, man? The Rugby Championship is reminding me of the decathlon in the Olympics, because even though the magnificent skill on display in being kind of really good at everything but not really amazing at one thing, elicits the best athlete of the world. And yet we don't even know the names of those athletes of the world that I said. Who won the decathlon 8 years ago? You have much greater chance that you would remember the gymnastics because your daughter's probably making you watch something and they're marketed, or some basketball player, or the sprinter, because these are very good at one thing. And decathlon is saying these are probably the best athletes in the world, but we don't even know how the scale works. So 8,000 good, is 6,000 points good? Can I fluff the pole vault? But there's no tension, so you watch it, and because they're not the greatest at their 1500, the final event, they're kind of just jogging, and the guy that wins just has to sort of finish. And so I think that, and then it all comes down to the favorite wins, which is New Zealand. And so I feel like sometimes the Rugby Championship is like that, in that the individual matchups matter a lot between the teams, like New Zealand, South Africa, the blood is slow. But we've still not been able to make this thing really matter as much as it should.
Yeah. And it's a good point that you make. And I must admit, these last two rugby-free weeks have been kind of weird. I didn't write a rugby column last week, so I really pulled back, and it's been a weird feeling, I've got to say. So I'm glad that this week's here. I'm glad that we can get into it, and we can pod for the next 15 nights straight, or whatever it's going to be.
We are podding so much. I think I'm on like 8 pods this week, and the banter is difficult. God. It's difficult to get aroused in a kind of like find the right banter calibration with Australia and South Africa, because the Wallabies and the Springboks never seem to really, to me, it doesn't really work. Yeah. Something about it is we don't hate each other enough, and we also don't know each other well enough sometimes. It's just kind of like the banter doesn't really land.
Too spread out. Yeah. It's a good point you make. It's a good point you made about decathlon too. I reckon I couldn't name an Olympic decathlete since Daley Thompson. There's a name from our childhood.
There you go. That's cool.
There you go. And it's been badminton in my house, for the record. Has been the really? I don't know why. I do not know why.
Playing badminton extends your life by 6.7 years. It is the sport if you play that it makes you live the longest longer than you would have. And really? Scientists don't know exactly why. I think it's because the shuttlecock drops such a weird way that you have to be so alive to get it, and you look like a total dous when you play that sport.
Might be true. Might be true. We are into episode 25 of the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast, and thanks so much for making us part of your rugby week, and a big rugby week it is, mate. So let's rip straight into cheers and jeers from the weekend. And I'm leading off with some cheers, and I'm pleased to say that my cheers this week is that some more Melbourne Rebels players are sorting themselves out. Taniela Tupou, Rob Leota, Darby Lancaster, likely Isaac Kailea are all heading to New South Wales. Lukan Solokai-Loto announced over the weekend for Queensland. David Felewai to the Brumbies. Australian under-20s midfielder Divad Palu to the Western Force. It's all starting to happen, and so far, no one major has been lost. Everyone has landed in Australian teams, which I think is really, really good, and there'll be more to come too, no doubt.
Yeah,
cheers.
They landed Mike Catt, attack coach.
Mike Catt, Dan Palmer, Lockie McCaffrey. I mean,
Mighty Waratahs have a better
just
coach.
Bringing the Brumbies up Hume Highway. He is. Anyway, cheers. Jimmy.
That's a better setup than Scotland has right now. Mm-hmm. We spend more of our life awake finding things than any other thing. It turns out, more than kissing, dancing, whatever, the things we think we should do in life, we actually try to find things. So I think it's interesting to me when I watch the Olympics, it's easy to find everything. You can find any kind of footage you want. You can share it. And kind of things that aren't that great from the sevens became million-person views. Because why? Because unlike in the World Rugby Cup, the Rugby World Cup where you couldn't just take a thing, find it, and share it because you get a strike, you get a letter from the from Sir Bill Beaumont and his crew.
Cease and desist.
You could just share at will. And my jeer is retroactively jeer at rugby and saying, why is this little training drill called Sevens drawing more attention in one moment than we had in this like magnificent World Cup where we could have all been ripping and shredding and sharing?
More than a few observations were made along those lines, and particularly, the drawing power of the American player whose name has just escaped me at the worst possible moment.
Ilona.
Who has Ilona, yes, and she has a bigger social media following than six of the top 10 countries. That might not be true, but you get my point.
We're not begrudging it. We're just saying, wow, what a missed opportunity that was.
Make the most of it. Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly. Anyway, the Rugby Championship is here. The teams are but days away, hours away, probably in the Springboks case. But there is lots to talk about in this year's tournament, and we can't wait to get into it with another of our favorite guests of the last couple of years. He's up next. He is up right now when I bring him in. With the four corners of the Sanzar universe coming into play in the Rugby Championship, it's time to spread ourselves far and wide. And though Harry has the hybrid accent department well covered for the 8-9 combo, we needed a bit more coverage than just that. So the obvious solution is to welcome back for his 8-9 combo debut, stuff.co.nz, senior sportswriter, Sydney Morning Herald rugby columnist, and the best Irish, Australian, Kiwi rugby scribe. There is Paul Cully. Welcome back to the pod, mate. Great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys again. How you going?
We're good, mate. We're very good. We're very good. I'm glad to hear you're hanging in down there in the depths of the South Island in New Zealand.
Yeah, just getting very excited about Stag Day this week, which is Southland versus Otago in Invercargill.
Of course it is.
The biggest day of the rugby calendar down here by quite some distance. So, it's obviously way bigger than the Rugby Championship, but we'll talk about the Rugby Championship as well. And Harry was complaining about maybe Australians and South Africans not hating each other enough. I'm going to stir it up a bit tonight by giving you something to get you a bit angry anyway.
All right. Well, there's a way to kick things off, Harry. There's a way. Let's get right into this. I'm really curious. I think there's some fascinating storylines and narratives going into this tournament. And for me, it actually starts with where the pressure sits. And I know, Harry, you're going to try and say it's, New Zealand are going to start favourites, but I feel like the pressure's on South Africa as back-to-back World Cup champions. It's just, if South Africa don't go through this tournament undefeated and win it comfortably, I think there'll be questions why, and there should be. Discuss.
I don't really think so. I think it depends on who. Like, obviously, losing to Argentina would be a big problem. The way in which some losses occurred. But I mean, so if you have someone who, like Rassi has done, brought the World Cup, got two stuck in the back pockets, with depth aplenty, 1,000 caps on first and second team. The idea of finding that third team and trying to mitigate against Sia being 33, a lot of players being 32, 31. I think people kind of understand that. It's just, a little bit like playing the All Blacks is going to be what everyone's excited about, but I don't know why it is, but dropping a couple to the Wallabies never seems to phase the central core of the anger. Like the real angriest guys don't seem to care that much. And I just don't know why that is exactly. So
South Africa's record in Australia has always fascinated me, Paul, and I'm sure you've covered that more than enough over the years. That it is a bit curious.
I've always felt that they've never got themselves up in a way that they get themselves up for the All Blacks.
Yeah.
And that's the big reason for it. Going back to the pressure point, it's Test rugby. Everybody's under pressure. I don't buy necessarily somebody under more pressure than somebody else, but the Springboks in particular, back-to-back the World Cups, where do they go from here? Like, if you want to be considered, they're the best team in the world. I've said this repeatedly. Okay, let's not relitigate that argument. But if you want to leave a greater legacy than that, then when you've won 2 World Cups, you have to start dominating teams. They need to come down here and beat Australia 2-0, and they've got to beat the All Blacks 2-0 in South Africa as well. They've got to make a really big statement. And then they can say, when it's all over and they're 50 years old, we were the greatest team possibly that this country's ever produced. That's the level I think they need to go to. And I mean, that's why I think Rassie has brought Tony Brown on. He's changed it up a little bit. He's trying to get them to the next level. So yeah, in terms of pressure, they have pressure in terms of, what do we want to be remembered for? Just a team that peaked every 4 years at the World Cup? Or do we want to be the best team that anybody's ever seen? And that's what you should be aiming for after you've won 2 World Cups. That's what you should be aiming for.
Yeah, there can't be a post World Cup hangover. You can't be the top team in the world and just go off the boil for the next couple of years. You're looking perplexed in the middle of all this, Harry.
The top team in the world is one who stays ranked number 1 and keeps it and fights it off in an age of parity. I think we're always comparing back to that run of the All Blacks had, which is I think might be unparalleled and might not happen again too often in our lifetime, from 2008 to 2016, whatever that was.
15,
that run.
16, yeah.
Where like the stats don't even make sense. And if Ireland is as good as it is, if England's coming up, if the All Blacks, traditionally can always rebound and reload, and the French, stocked with talent for the next 5 years, it doesn't feel like any one team is going to run away from anyone. All I'm saying is, who can absorb a loss? I think Razer is staring down the barrel of a shotgun. If he was to, shit the bed on this one, you saw how quickly Ian Foster got double barrels pointed at him. Imagine Razer, if you just squeak by England, didn't look that convincing, and then you lose 3. All the Kiwis I know, they just get really hot and bothered about that. And they'll start saying, but it's because you have Perifetta, it's because you don't have Richie back, it's because there'll be a lot of that. And where are our locks? That sort of thing. And so I think that Rassie's self-imposed pressure, and I think he can handle. I mean, Rassie has proved he can handle everyone hating him. For a while. I don't know. Razor's like the guy who likes people to like him. Razor is a good time guy. He's a
now. Rassie just only a few hours before we started recording this has pleaded to South Africa for everyone to get behind him, and we need to feel your love.
Yeah, sure.
So he wants everyone to love him too. Don't worry about that.
But if you hate him, he can handle it. I promise you.
Yes. Well, I mean, he'll put out an hour-long video about you, but he can handle it. Yeah. Do you agree, Paul, that the Boks start raging favourites this year?
I wouldn't say raging favourites, but they are favourites just by the nature of the draw as well.
That's exactly what I'm alluding to. New Zealand in South Africa for 2.
Yeah, and Harry touched on it. All Blacks haven't been convincing. They're still finding their way. I don't think you'll really see Razor's team as such until the end of the year, early next year. So when I look at the All Blacks pack compared to South Africa, I see an advantage for South Africa, quite comfortably. And this is. Going back to the expectations, they should win both of those tests in South Africa. This is not a great All Blacks era. Definitely some holes there. And
where do you think
I do agree.
Where do you think the most holes are in the All Blacks? Is it at lock?
Lock, number 10, number 13 at the minute. No decision there. 15. Yeah. Who's your fullback? Who's their best wingers? There's question marks all over the place. Halfback.
So it's curious to hear Robertson talking about Will Jordan so open. Like he is the man. I am going to play him at fullback, and that seems like a massive ask for a guy who hasn't played a lot of rugby in the last 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, the question I have about Jordan is defensively. He's had a couple of bad games, one in particular against Springboks under the high ball. I think it might have been in Australia when it was
one of the COVID years ago. Yeah.
And he was very, very poor in the World Cup final as well. And the question mark over him has always been around high ball defense, and he's going to be asked any questions in that regard as well. So I'm not a massive Will Jordan is the new Christian Cullen type pundit. I think that a guy like Corey Jane is somebody that the All Blacks have more need of at the minute. Somebody who reads the game so well, great under the high ball. So I mean, the All Blacks have got real vulnerabilities. There's no doubt about that. And Harry touched on a good point. If they do lose one or two, especially in a row, we haven't seen Razer under pressure yet. What's he going to do under pressure?
No, he's kind of made a habit of winning everything. That's certainly true. Harry, how many more years does this box squad have together? Can they get to 27, or will they lose a percentage of this squad before that?
Yeah, if you just look at them a little bit and you think, what must be true, they're probably really old. But actually, they line up almost perfectly to, in some of them cases, go to 4 World Cups. And it's because Pollard, De Allende, Creel, Lewid, who's still in the picture, Eben, they're actually perfectly aged because they came in so young at 2015. So
yes, they were all 18, 19, 20 when they came in.
So there's a huge cluster of people from 30 to 33. There's only a few that go 33 plus. So if you circle them, and I went through and just want to put them in red. It's only a handful of people. And so, can all these people get to 2027? Peter Steph-Toy with the mileage on him, Eben, Sia, and someone like Malherbe. Probably a couple of those people don't. Probably a couple don't, but not necessarily all don't. I would think Sia will be the most likely to not get there 27, the captain. But everyone else probably has a bit of a shot to get there. Villiers would be maybe a little bit too old too. But there's people stocked and ready, right? Willemse is right there at 25. Sasha, the new, anointed one, 22. There's a whole lot of people coming through. So I think Rossi's real skill has been to create this depth, like a real program, like a system where everyone slots in, everyone knows exactly what they're doing. He doesn't let any personalities get there that are bigger than his or who will defy him. And so it's a real system. And I think the good coaches do build that. So I think it's not as dire as people might think. It's almost alarming how much there probably will be in 2027 that will have played together for 3 or 4 World Cups, which is kind of hard to do in this day and age. And that's probably why there's the pressure you're talking about is real in the sense of self-imposed. We should be doing better in between World Cups. But Rossi would say, if you gave him truth serum, he would say, well, I'm using a lot of those matches to restock, and I'm not throwing away any matches, but I'm not caring that much about a Welsh team or the Argentina. There's always experimentation going on.
Did they hurt enough losing to Ireland in Durban?
Oh, that was really painful, but it's so restricted to Ireland.
It was painful at the time, but it sort of felt like within a couple of days or so they went,
no.
Next,
I'm gonna think about that the rest of my life, and I think that the Irish rivalry is already grown into a thing that supersedes the Wallabies rivalry. It's really weird.
Yeah, true.
But there's something about Ireland that really, really irritates us, and we have to wait till 2025 November. And I'm circling the date right now. Be in Dublin, and I just want to bash my head against something until we win. But that kind of fire is what I'm talking about. With green and gold versus green and gold is really an amazing rivalry. It's one of the closest long rivalries we have, and we still have a hard time getting amped up. And I'm not sure exactly what it is. I don't know if we might just like each other too much.
Are you forgetting we've got an Irish guest on tonight?
Well, I mean, so Cully knows about the spice of that. I mean, it's really from both sides, both teams. Look, I'm saying it's a good thing. Rugby needs more rivalries. And as someone said on our pod recently, it's hard to monetize, sorry for the word, these friendly matches and these matches in July. It's great when you have two teams who care about it. Anyone watching the Ireland-South Africa 2-game series, they were transfixed by it. It was amazing, off the charts desire to win.
Yeah, the runaway story after that series, Paul, was we needed a third test there, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Leinster versus Bulls game before the series started, and you could tell already that there was a lot of intensity in that, especially from the Bulls side. That defensively, they were just. I'd watched that game 20 times over the years in Super Rugby. And the Bulls did to Leinster what they've done to lots of Australian, New Zealand teams. Just the appetite and defence and that Cameron Honeycomb, that number 8, and Elric Lowe, they're just lining people up. And it just plays into that South African psyche, especially as they managed to convince themselves that they were these vast underdogs against this all-conquering Leinster team. And I'm thinking, what? But they're so good at that. And
at Loftus, you're underdogs.
Just absolutely just smashing people and just loving it as well. And I knew when I saw that game that the July tests were going to be something special. And I just wish, for Harry's sake, that South Africa didn't stop playing for a little bit as they did in the second half, the second test. And I'm sure Tony Brown was pulling his hair out, because that's not what he's all about. Ireland were there for the take. They still could have won that test. I probably should have, but kicking the ball high and Osborne catching everything just killed them. And the game was there for the taking. And Harry's right. That would have hurt, because that was definitely one that got away.
Yeah. Who's this Rugby Championship sort of feels like it's all about the rebuilds, and that's obviously not the Boks, because they're completely unchanged for the fact that they lost a physio after the World Cup. So whose rebuild do you think is under more scrutiny? Is it Scott Robinson's? Is it Felipe Contepomi? Is it Joe Schmidt's?
No, it's obviously All Blacks. It's obviously All Blacks. The thing with when Razer came in, the expectation levels were so unrealistically high that it's kind of set them up for a fall. So when they lose the first test, and they will, it's inevitable. It'll probably, I would say, it'll come against South Africa. And then they have to go on a hard Northern tour as well. So it's definitely the All Blacks. Joe's been really clever in the media about playing things down, and poor little me. I've only had 2 minutes together with this team, blah blah blah, and just like, don't believe a word of it. There won't be a test that he would go into not thinking he can't win it. And that brings me on to why South Africa should be pretty angry, because my understanding is that Joe was furious about the officiating the Rugby World Cup final, very bitter about that, and was pushing World Rugby pretty hard afterwards. The implication being that South Africa got lucky a little bit, or got away with a few things in the World Cup final. So if you want to try and stir this test up for this weekend, it's go down that angle, because I don't think Joe Schmidt thinks that the best team won the World Cup final.
Well, it certainly adds a bit of spice, Harry, given Joe on Sunday spoke about South Africa don't really need a lot of luck because things seem to fall their way.
Yeah, I used the word tend, and I caught on that. I jumped on it and I said, okay, the banter has started, because that's kind of a Joe Schmidt way of doing it. He's not going to be blunt and direct. It's going to be this passive aggressive thing. So I read it's like the Boks tend to get the luck. I go, okay, Joe, that was about the final, wasn't it? Because that's got nothing to do with Wallabies week. So you are saying, you're making a claim, you're asserting that if you're really like mean and ugly to referees and you get like banned for a couple of years, that makes referees like you, or did you scare them? So it's an interesting theory that Ben O'Keefe or Wayne Barnes was somehow greatly affected by Rossi and gave them the rub of the green. A lot of Bok fans would point to specific moments through the years where we think Rossi shot us in the foot, and that his relationship was terrible with referees, and it made people even like ping us more. So I don't know. I think that was an attempt by Joe to relitigate the past. And what I would say is a lot of things tend to happen with the Boks, and one of those is we tend to win World Cups. And Joe is actually guilty. I think Joe's guilty in that World Cup final as well. It's almost like the same thing as the Boks did against Ireland. I think Joe went into his shell a little bit in the final, and that game was there for the taking. And so, I do think that's a very interesting point, Cully, about him, still harboring some resentment about that final.
The little context of that just makes what he said on Sunday all the more curious. Yeah.
Well, so I think one of Joe's biggest missions with the Wallabies is to stop the Wallabies being the most penalized, most carded team in rugby. One of the things you could like, whether it was Checker, Rennie, Jones, or even Schmidt so far, it's been double-digit penalties and a card almost every single match. If I was a Wallabies, if I was a really deep down Wallabies fan, how angry would I be that for a decade you cannot fix that? So I would think Schmidt's got to get on the right side of referee. So it might be part of his discussion with them, with the referee, sort of indirectly.
Yeah, I've certainly lost count of how many times I've written about Wallabies discipline in the last 10 years. That's for sure. Paul, you raised a really interesting point in your Sydney Morning Herald column Sunday night, Monday's print copy, about this Rugby Championship bringing through the first generation of players on all sides of the divide who haven't really played a lot of cross-border rugby. So there's a lot of Australian, New Zealand players who haven't faced South Africans. There's a lot of South African players now who have only played in the ERC, and they haven't played much against Super Rugby sides. What's the implications, do you think, for the Rugby Championship now with this group of players?
My impression is that it favours South Africa. The reasons for that would be, those South African players in the URC and in the European competitions, they've come up against some pretty sophisticated attacks and great coaching, and talking about Leinster, Munster, Northampton. Bulls sent a weakened team to Northampton, but they got absolutely cut to shreds by Northampton. The French teams as well, Glasgow as well, run some lovely patterns. So it's not as if they're not coming up against good teams with good skill sets, ability to move the ball, right? But I don't think Australian and New Zealand teams, particularly Australian teams in the derbies, are coming up against that raw physicality. And I keep going back to the Bulls. Unless you're playing the Blues every week. The Blues this year, for me, changed Super Rugby for the better because they just wanted to kill everybody. And they told everybody, we're going to kill you. And what are you going to do about it? Nobody could stop them.
Try and stop
us. They killed the Brumbies. They just absolutely bullied them.
Well, and then what they did to the Chiefs in the final was
brutal.
No one saw that coming. Yeah.
So that's one team, but you don't get that South African physicality. So I guess it's a roundabout way of saying that I think that the Australian and New Zealand teams have lost more by the absence of South Africa than South Africa have lost by the absence of New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah,
that's my theory. It may turn out to be complete nonsense, but that's the way I feel. I would add one caveat in that when the young South African team, I know it's not a great vintage this year, the under-20s came to the Sunshine Coast for the Rugby Championship earlier this year. The Australian under-20s beat them quite well.
Beat them pretty well,
by more. So does that change things? I don't know. But it just shows you can't be so totally confident in any theory. But that's the way I think it may work out. That it favors South Africa.
It feels like there's something in this, Harry, and I have to admit, I hadn't thought of this being a thing until we were sort of discussing things we were going to talk about with Paul over the last few days, and it's a really interesting angle, I think, to the Rugby Championship this year.
Yeah, number one, I wasn't aware at how quickly that generational gap had developed, had exacerbated.
And that's so. Just to pick up on that, that's because we globally now, everyone thinks of COVID as something that happened 18 months ago, when in actual fact it started 4.5 years ago. So it's like we've lost years of the last decade.
Yeah, I think I get that, and I'm just contemplating the Cully doctrine right now, and I think what's persuasive about it is, Paul, I think when you haven't been around something, which shocks you more, speed or violence, And I think I think the Boks have been around enough, because most of them play on other leagues too. So they've been enough around all kinds of different things that it's harder to phase them. But I think the actual brutality of Arceus Snyman, linked with Ibn Etzebeth, linked with Peter Seftotoy, there's some animal dimensions there that don't naturally occur. It's not the same. Even Patrick Tuipulotu is a tough guy. He's not the same as how badly those guys murder you.
No, and we saw it all the time when Super Rugby was Super Rugby. Any wannabe, Australian wannabe, New Zealand wannabe in the tight five, you track their form and go, yeah, this guy's going great. And then you watch him against the Stormers. Right? Yeah. And then you would make your judgment on whether he's going to make it into the All Blacks or not. So as Harry mentioned, the first time that these guys are getting judged whether they can cope with Test rugby is in Test rugby now.
Yes,
against South Africa, and that's a very, very hard place to learn a lesson.
Yeah, I remember Tom Hooper going to Loftus, and I was there at the game. It was the first Eddie Jones test. And I saw, like the warm-ups are great. I love, and I know Brett likes going to go into live to a game and see what teams do. And Eddie had kind of a loose, pre-match. It wasn't really going that well. He was walking around. Tom Hooper was walking around, and he looked really alarmed at what he was seeing in the stands. Like just the actual tribal affiliations, the genetics at play, the brandy, the coke, the ferocity. People like really hating him. It looked kind of taken aback, like what's going on? And then the game was so miserable for him. And I thought,
you can't get bottles into Canberra Stadium.
You pick whatever you want into Loftus, but why was Tom Hooper thrown into that? And I just thought the same thing that you just said. It's like difficult. There was no lead in. There was no gentle incremental lead in to what it's like to be thrown to cannibals.
Yeah. It's a really good point. It'll be fascinating to see. And you think about players in the various squads, and we saw a little bit of Damien Willemser in Super Rugby, but certainly not the young 10 whose name I keep boring up, Harry. Sasha. We certainly, no, I'm until I've got it written down in front of me, I'm not going to do it. We don't know anything about him. Equally, the likes of Noah Hotham and Cam Roygar's not playing, but those Josh Lord, those guys have not been to South Africa. Tom Hooper's only found out the hard way himself, and it'll be the same of an Argentinian team who we all of a sudden only know maybe half of. So, it's going to be curious. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think the team who's theoretically most vulnerable is the Wallabies. Yeah. Look at this weekend and at number 7. What are they going to do there? Either Luke Reimer or Carlo Dezzano is going to have the toughest night of their careers by a long way on Saturday. If they're picked to start, I don't know how they're going to juggle that loose forward mix. It's pretty difficult. It's coming, and it's coming, but you can't really, as Harry said, you can't really prepare for that intensity.
No, unless they're running it three blokes all week at training. And look, it's going to be a fascinating thing. And I think that was the other main thing that came out of Joe Schmidt's press conference on Sunday is that I'm not sure that he knows yet which way he's going to lean. And it was certainly put to him that, Luke Reimer, as good a player as he is and as hard on the ball as he is, he led Super Rugby for pilfers per 80 minutes, which speaks to his bench impact because he doesn't play anywhere near 80 minutes in a game. And Joe Schmidt acknowledged that. He said, that's an issue. It is an issue that he played off the bench for the last 12 games of the Brumbies season. Tizzano certainly played more and started pretty much every week, but he's a different sort of player to Reimer and a different player again to Carlo Tizzano, to Fraser McRae, beg your pardon. So I almost feel like the perfect replacement for McWright was probably Liam Wright, and so maybe he's going to be the biggest miss of them all.
But Brett, are you saying that Harry and Bobby, that's sort of set in stone, and you're just finding an on the ball specialist, or is there some mix and match at play there? Would you have Bobby V go back to 8 and then possibly move people around and have a big 6, like a LSL could be a 6, or even I don't know, like could be a lock 6.
Yeah, that would be one way of doing it, and. Mate, like maybe you could start Harry Wilson at 7, but I think the obvious options are, if you're going to do like a mix-up type thing, is going to be Tom Hooper, who has started tests and a few games for the Brumbies at 7. Or Schmidt made mention of specifically of Sarah Uru from Queensland, and he actually said, he might be able to come in and play a sort of a hybrid all-rounder type job, which instantly took me back to
a hell of a debut.
It would be a hell of a debut. It instantly took me back to the notion of utility players last year, which was trumpeted but never used. So, maybe we might actually have a genuine utility type forward this year. So, look, it'd be fascinating to see where he does land on Thursday, because, it's going to be a huge test for a fairly young and fairly raw Australian back row unit, no doubt. And there's as good a break point as any.
Really confusing where they're going to go with that, actually.
Yeah, it is. And as I say, I don't think Joe knows at this stage. Paul, we'll get into the squads in a second, but the new trials, the law trials that are going to be in place for the Rugby Championship this year, agreement across the SANZAAR universe, 30 seconds to set a scrum, 30 seconds to have a line out underway, which we've seen in Super Rugby. That won't be too far out of the ordinary. 60 seconds for a conversion, down from 90 seconds this year. Do you think it will have as big an impact as Joe Schmidt was sort of suggesting it might on Sunday?
No.
Yeah. No, that's simple. 20 minute red cards obviously will be back as well.
Yeah, I think he's working off old information on that. By the way, there was also some articles come out that said the way to beat the Boks is to tire them out or make them
keep them moving.
That's really old information. Like in most of the matches for the last 2 years that you played, second off was Boks win. I think maybe 4 years now. There was not a fitness gap between Ireland and South Africa, and Ireland is traditionally the fittest team now for a while. When you watch the Earth,
there's not a fitness gap when you're bringing on 6 and 7 forwards at the 45-minute mark.
But even in the starter, there's just the Wallabies will be the bigger team. There's a lot of just old information.
No, they won't.
Not this week. They won't. You actually measure the guys and you actually say who's who. It's like that's a very fit, quick team. The reason why Damon Willemse did the famous mark thing was they wanted to tire the French forwards out because they could never get them into a scrum and they were not moving. So it was a way of making them move 20 meters to a scrum and actually scrum. So there's a lot of, I think that's overread, this rule change. I think it doesn't really matter as much as what people are making it out to be.
No, I think we're all pretty used to it. I was actually surprised that he thought it would have as big an impact as he did. So onto the squads then. For the Wallabies, Angus Bell's back, Marika Cotombette's back, obviously McWright and Liam Wright out, as we've talked about. Luke Reimer, Kala Tizano in line for what will be a hell of a debut. Corey Toole's in the squad, Max Jorgensen's in the squad, Darby Lancaster's out. So there's only room for one there's two X7s players. Dylan Peach is in there still. Did you like the look of that Wallabies squad, Paul? Was there some surprises there for you?
I'm a big Rory Scott fan.
I
would have him in the squad ahead of both Luke Reimer and Carlo Tizano. I think he's got a bit of something about him. I like his size. I think he can handle himself test-wise in that jersey. So I'm a little bit disappointed not to see him there. The rest of the squad, Joe's obviously casting the net a bit wide. He's experimenting still. But the rest of the squad is as much as expected. It'd be a bit much asking Bell to come straight back in.
And he sort of suggested that he's not far away, but I sort of took that to say he's not going to play either of these box tests.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the interesting one was Max Jorgensen. That tells me that he is actually closer to Joe's thinking about his top team than people realize. I don't think that Tom Wright is going to be Joe's long-term 15. I think he's going to end up on the wing possibly. I just don't. Yeah, I think he defensively got into a bit of trouble a couple of times against Wales. I think he got away with it in the first test, and even that first test before he scored that try and he dropped the ball as well. I'm not convinced about Tom Wright at 15. Brett, I know
Okay.
I'm
No.
I'm a safe distance from Canberra, so I think that position is in play, not immediately, but
Yeah,
longer
right.
term.
That's interesting.
And Jorgensen will obviously come into the mix there. I do like Marika's recall. I think that from what I hear from Japan, and I watched the final, he was Marika, just doing the same thing, running hard.
Exceptional in the final. Yeah.
And so I would imagine he's a pretty good chance to start.
Yeah, I'd think so, Harry. You've not brought him back from Japan. I mean, he's probably been in Australia anyway, but you've not brought him into the squad to leave him in the squad.
Yeah, you know what you get from him, and also it would be lovely if Korobete and Nick White play this game, because that would get the Box and the Box fans very amped, because we have revenge in mind on those two.
Yeah, but it's a shame that he can't get square on Faf.
Yeah, true. I've always, Cully, I've always thought that when you're looking for like personality ticks and like a look into someone's inner psyche as a coach, number 8, number 15, I always go to those selections, to some extent 9, but 8 and 15 particularly, because there's a different way to play. You can actually put something different on the field with a certain kind of 8 and a certain kind of 15. And so I look at Joe over the years, and Rob Carney being installed there forever and ever, and then CJ Stander at 8. Those were not always popular choices in the Irish fandom. There were a lot of calls for that to be changed. But he stuck with those guys, and what I see from that, the lesson I learned from that is CJ was just a guy ready to carry, yes, carry, yes, carry, yes, like almost to a weird degree, running into those G-forces. And then Rob Carney was just my no mistake fullback. Like, I'm gonna play the game. I'll be in the right spot. I won't necessarily be Tom Wright. I won't be able to do something magic all the time. Is that how you read that he wants to have the Wallabies shape into? Is this monster carrier at 8, hard worker, and then at 15, just someone who doesn't F up?
Yeah, well, he's got those options right now, hasn't he? I mean, he could move Valentini to 8 and put Callaway
at fullback. That's what I was going to say. Callaway's your no mistake fullback, not Jorgensen.
I was actually a little bit surprised that Wright started at 15 against Wales. I thought Callaway was going to be the fullback.
We were saying all through Super Rugby, Paul, that it felt like you could throw the 14 and the 15 jersey in the air to Callaway and Wright, and it wouldn't matter which one they grabbed. They would both fit into both jobs equally well. By the end of the season, it was pretty clear to me that Wright had gone to a level that Callaway just hadn't. So I wasn't at all surprised. But I absolutely agree with you in terms of if you want a no-mistake player at fullback, then it's absolutely Callaway.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the 10 situation, no matter who you pick there, Noah or Tom Lina, I think are probably the top 2 going forward. They still look a little bit lost at times. And a Test Rugby, like, where's my 15? Like, what would they give for Villy LaRue at this stage of their careers?
Yeah.
It would be enormous. So that's another one of the reasons I think the 15 jersey's not settled yet. I'm a huge Max Jorgensen fan. I think he was badly mismanaged last year, shouldn't have been near Test Rugby. But what I saw from him last year, not attacking wise, because you expect out of an 18, 19-year-old's going to do some good things, but just his contact work in defence. He stripped the ball out of Duplessis Carriffy's hands in Wellington against the Hurricanes. That told me more than all the the attacking highlights.
Yeah.
So I think he's made of the right stuff.
Yeah, right.
What's Max's kicking ability like? I haven't really drilled down on that. Is he a 2-foot guy? Is he a good length?
No, good length.
I don't think he's both fit though.
No, right-footed, good length.
Yeah.
Obviously, this stage of his career can get a lot more sophisticated, but he's got good distance. He's got a good foundation.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to. I can't think of too many two-footed kickers in Australia. Never mind at fullback, Harry. So that's a good question that you raised. The Boks are missing a few as well. Obviously, Jean Clean, Ludiaga, Franco Mostert are all missing. Kitchoff's out. Faf de Klerk, Jordan Hendrickson, Herschel Yankees are out. Kanan Moody, Edward Fundermover, Damien Willemse are all out injured. And then Visa and Esterhausen suspended as well. So it's going to be a different looking Springbok squad in Queensland and Perth next week.
Yeah, so some of the Visa being out has either forced or allowed Rassie to do some experimentation. He had Kwacha Smith at 8, starting 8, which was, I think if he had one single thing to do differently and makes the series a more of a route, not a route, but like a clear, decisive. It would have been having just anybody else, like El Ikhlo, Ivan Ruiz, anyone who was just a gangbuster, big real 8. Kwacha was in there to do the center because under Tony Brown, you have Peter Steph Totoy and Sia Khaleesi on the trams in attack, and then when transition happens, it was on Kwacha to be the stopper or the get over the line. He just doesn't have it.
He was the rugby league middle forward.
Yeah, and he's great off the bench. So I think there'll be a return to that. Lowe has been named ahead of Russ. Russ then went ahead and got a surgery, but I think he was dropped, right? So it's around 8 that you're looking at for the South African fans. Is they're hyper-focused on who can be the like-for-like replacement of Peter Steph Totoy when he comes to an end. So Ben Jason Dixon is a guy you probably haven't heard that much about, and that name will be a big name because he's one of the big winners out of the Irish series, and then the game against Portugal is this guy just looks like he has that kind of motor. He's that kind of he's a very athletic guy, shaped like Peter.
Look really impressive.
In the backs, it's all about Sasha Feinberg, Gomzulu, and we want to see that guy
to get
on
the name around
the
that
field against the Wallabies because he just has that magic. But beyond that, it's people It's people you've known for a long, long time.
Yeah.
You've seen them. Maybe Curtly Arons is not as well known to some Wallaby fans, and that boy's got magic in his feet as well. We call them the lackerbacks because they just have these unnecessary scrum caps and swivelly hips, and they work so hard and they're unnaturally strong for their size. So there's a lot of those churning out. Edville would have been one more.
I like how you're saying we call them leckerbacks when you absolutely made that word up yourself.
It's a thing. Hashtag. I think it's exciting. This, Tony Brown is trying to put the ball through different channels, wider in the trams with big forward carriers. So, Cully, I know you love to see innovations and change ups and stuff. Tony's really trying to make that ball sing and move quicker, both on the counter but also on second and third phase.
I tell you one thing I learned from Tony when he was down here in Dunedin at the Highlanders, and it's a really interesting thing in terms of the Springboks, is that one of the metrics that he used to love was ball and play time, especially when coming up against a bigger team like the Blues, looking for 32, 33, 34, 35 minutes. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how the Springboks kind of weave that into their game plan, because we know that they can slow it down when they need to. I think they'll miss Faf de Klerk. I think he plays a key role.
Yeah, I think they will
in the setup. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Tony does with that backline, because when I look at South Africa now, not just the team starting 15, but a little bit wider, the athletes coming out of South Africa at the minute, multi-skilled, and Sasha is just like won the genetic lottery, hasn't he? He's tall, he's fast, he's just,
he's got
amazing
so much
player.
time on the ball, so much
Brilliant
time on the ball.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm hoping that Rassie lets Tony push it as far as he can. Because I really think, that first test against Ireland, some of the stuff that South Africa played was just, I thought it was outstanding. Really, really outstanding. Yeah. And I really agree with Harry as well. I think it was a big mistake to play Quagga at 8. Yeah. But I looked at that performance and thought, oh my God, if they had a gain line 8, getting them even quicker ball, that's going to be really, really hard to stop. Really hard.
It's going to be big pressure on the Wallabies defence this weekend. The All Blacks, as we've sort of talked about, Will Jordan's back, David Havili's back, Sam Cane's back, Ruben Love's first selection. I think he's been universally praised. Scott Barrett will definitely miss the first 2 tests. Josh Lord's in there as cover. Noah Hotham now going above Finlay Christie in the pecking order, I think, is interesting, Paul.
Yeah, he's, in my opinion, far from the finished article. Individually, a brilliant player.
Really good player, yeah.
Used to be a centre.
Used to be a centre, yeah, right.
Yeah, his decision making needs a year or 2. So I think that, when Cam Roygaard comes back in, he'll drop out.
Yeah,
he'd be the player I think would drop out. So I'm not getting too excited about Noah Hotham at this stage. I think he's going to be a good player, but I don't think he's ready at the minute, and I don't think he'll play in any of the big tests. And that's a story really of Razer's tenure so far. It's just been very steady as she goes. There hasn't really been a big selection change or any tactical change at all.
David Havili coming back is the opposite of that, isn't it?
I've been surprised by that, Cully. The degree to which it's been like Razer hasn't put his stamp on it yet.
Yeah,
it doesn't look like that. The one thing that's kind of curious to me, maybe you have the real story behind the story, Satutu being left out in favor of Satiti. I don't really get that. Just from afar, I looked at Satutu and it looks like he's playing test footy for the Blues. It looks like that's what test rugby is all about.
It's attacking alphabetically.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't get it. You're not alone, Harry. There was references made to some of his defensive work. Satiti gives away fewer penalties, makes probably more tackles, probably quicker off his feet.
Makes as much ground, certainly.
Yeah, quicker off his feet as well. But going back to this Razer putting his imprint on it, I think it's the biggest red herring in Test rugby at the minute, that he is going to bring in an identifiable style in the way that the Blues were identifiable. Ireland are very identifiable. I mean, I'll ask you two, tell me what you think the Crusader style was of the last 7 years.
Yeah, I don't think there was a style. It was just a relentlessness. They just got things done, didn't they? And I completely agree with you.
I thought it was territory based. I thought it was
territory and set piece. Yeah.
But that's every team, isn't it? Not. They didn't do anything in particular that was overly clever.
No.
So I think when you're looking for the difference that Razer can make, I would define it this way: he's trying to introduce a number of characteristics that'll make them harder to beat, and he does that by connecting the squad so that when there's 10 minutes to go and the Boks are in the 22, then they go up 2 or 3 gears, turn it into an absolute shit fight, make it a war. And you don't get that unless the players are tightly connected. So I think people need to stop looking for style and start looking for what are the characteristics of the All Blacks team that he's going to be developing. And defensive toughness will be one of them. And skill set will be the other one. I had a really interesting conversation with Neil Barnes, Taranaki coach, ex-Chiefs assistant coach, ex-Italy defence coach, last Thursday or Friday. He said to me, yes, we'd brought in some shapes from Ireland into Taranaki last year when they won the NPC. And he said, yeah, that's all well and good. But unless you have the skill work, the fundamental skill work to underpin that, shapes are just shapes. They don't mean anything. I saw in Super Rugby, some Super Rugby teams run shapes. Shapes don't win you games. It's the skill set that underpins that. So you kind of forget about all what shapes and numbers, formations, all that stuff with Razer. Go to the heart and defense and the skill set in any part of the game. Attack, phase play, transition. And that's how he'll put his imprint on the team. Forget about, he's not going to invent a new shape. He's not going to reinvent the wheel. Didn't do that at the Crusaders, and he won't do it at the All Blacks either, I don't think.
Yeah, I remember I listened to Ronan O'Gara, and it was the time when he was at the Crusaders, and they were pushing him. It was a Northern Hemisphere pod, and they were pushing him on what he learned, and they were looking for these Jedi Knight secrets, technical,
the magic
and
dust.
And what came out of the interview from Ronan was just the love, the culture, the time they spent together on weekends. That at Razer knew everyone's family really well, and that like they all just, I don't know, maybe it's cliched and maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but they loved each other, and there was this I'll fight for you kind of thing. Does that work at test level, or is Razer trying to bring something that's much more of a club, South Island, Canterbury type thing?
Remains to be seen, doesn't it? Remains to be seen.
Yeah,
it's a lot harder. He doesn't have a 3-4 month preseason to go away on bonding trips and all the rest of it. He doesn't have a defined date, a Super Rugby final, and go, guys, put this red dot around this. This is all what we're aiming for. Every weekend's a final. So that's the question that he's got to answer, Harry, but that's what he's working on. And what I would say after watching the first 3 tests is that Razor's plan A is to have a good plan B. Because when plan A is not working, he's not afraid of changing it up at halftime, going, just kick the ball down the field, chase it, put them under pressure, and do it that way. And I think that
was so tight. I mean, there were a couple of things that could have bounced the wrong way, and England's pulling off something really infamous or famous, depending on who you like England. Go ahead.
It's better to be lucky as the coach than to be good, right? And England were unlucky to lose 2-0. Yeah. They could have won 2-0.
They could have won 2-0 for sure.
In fairness, it should have been 1-1. But that's Razor's whole career. Canterbury, Crusaders. He's won about 1 million games that he shouldn't have won.
Yeah.
So how does he do that? I don't know. That's his magic, I guess.
That's the magic dust.
Everybody's waiting for gravity to pull him back down to earth. And, Test Rugby will do that to you at some point. But he's obviously, even in the early stages, got the group caring about each other and digging out of a hole that they're in twice against England. So he's done something.
Yeah, he's got them connected somehow. The Los Pumas to finish have called a heap back as well, who didn't play in the July test. Lucio Cinti, Augustin Creevy's back, Juan Martin Gonzalez, Thomas Lavanini, Juan Cruz Malia, Joel Sclavi, Ifran Elias, who captained down to 20 side, makes his first senior squad appearance as well. Geronimo De La Fuente is not playing those. So I said before, I sort of feel like it's actually surprising how disconnected we've become from Argentina. We see them, once a year for 6 weeks, and I don't know a whole lot about the Argentinian side anymore. I know a lot of the names, but it's sort of like we're back to seeing them at World Cup time again only.
Yeah, what I would say about Argentina is that I watched both of those tests against France, and they were terrible in the first one, but in the second one,
they were really good in the second. Yeah,
Pablo Matera, Marcus Kremer, and Santiago Chocobares, 3 of the big names, just went, all right, leave it to us.
Let's go.
So that's the danger when you play them, and when the Wallabies play them as well. They have that capacity still to hurt teams, and Carreras on the wing as well. So they're dangerous.
It's an interesting model with Argentina, right? So South Africa has players sort of placed between Japan, UK, France. Argentina's all in on foreign competitions, but a lot of their players are playing at the pinnacle of it. I mean, they Malia, Chocobares, Cinti, these guys are playing at top level, getting much better coaching than they would be getting if they were still playing just in Juarez, Super Rugby. So I think that's interesting to see if Contepomi can pull it together. For me, the one question about the Pumas is both literally their props, and then if Carreras is really a 10 or not. Because if you can solve those 2 issues, Argentina is hard to beat. They've got some really quality loose forwards now, even young guys coming through. Their midfielders are right up there. I mean, I don't know. There's not that many midfield that are better.
he's more and more a 10. We talked about this in July, didn't we? That even his first test to his second test was chalk and cheese, and he was outstanding in that second test. So he's looking more and more at home. Yeah, no doubt. It'll be interesting, Paul, to see how it all plays out. It all starts this weekend. We'll start seeing teams later in the next few days, as I say, and I suppose we start finding out for once and for all where the Southern Hemisphere pecking order is. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to South African fans being very gracious about the state of Super Rugby Pacific after the 2-0 series victory in Australia. I'm sure it'll be very measured and even-handed.
Yeah, no doubt at all, mate. It's been great to have you back on. It's been a really, really good chat. We've got into some serious weeds about the squads and everything leading into these games. Look forward to doing it again at some point this year again.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Cully.
This is the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones. And, mate, so good once again to catch up with Paul Cully. That got awfully meaty, didn't it?
Cully knows stuff. And so I like talking to him because there's usually like an actual, like a real source behind it. He's not one of those people who makes up shit. And so I think it's very interesting. I love the theme of Joe finally getting to the World Cup final and then feeling like he got, shafted again.
Got robbed.
And so
yeah.
That might be what, that might be an animating impulse. I think, even coaches have to refresh and have a new, driving impulse. Joe looks, ready. I worry about for Joe, and it's in this particular fortnight, it's good for me. I worry that he doesn't have enough material to work with. I never doubt Joe Schmidt's ability to coach. I just don't know if I look at that, like if it's 65 minutes and you're pulling on a bench, pack of forwards or something. I don't know. I just don't see. I don't see it.
You look at that July squad, and it was very clear very early on that if there is a player that Joe Schmidt right now cannot afford to lose, it's Fraser McWright, and he's the one that's been lost. And
he was playing so well. He was definitely one of those guys who could have poke-hocked us. I do think you say 5 best players and 5 best players. It's not far off. When you go like, what's your 4 weakest players? Your 4 weakest players. I think that's where the Wallabies.
That's the big difference.
It's a difficulty.
And even beyond that, players 25 to 36 in the 2 squads, and there'll be World Cup winners in the South African bottom 10. That's the reality of it. We'll head around the grounds, mate, to touch on major talking points from the one game of rugby played on the weekend, and that was the Major League Rugby Championship final at the Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego on Sunday. And this is where I tell you that I've seen a score and nothing else. So talk me through New England Free Jacks 20 beat the Seattle Seawolves 11. And I've got to say, we saw boilovers in the championship semis. That is a boilover.
The bad and the good. The bad is that the Free Jacks won, and I'm not a big fan of the Free Jacks. I tend to go more towards the West. And I thought that Seattle had it. So to your point, I think that's true. The good. Almost 13,000 people at Snapdragon. A nice turnout at a neutral venue. So, everyone had to travel. You'd imagine if that had been sited in Seattle or in New England, it would have been even better if it had the capacity. But that's a good sign to get 13,000 people. That's not nothing. That figure would compare nicely with a lot of the game day attendances in the Premiership and ERC. Other thing is,
and that would verify, that would justify the decision to go to a neutral ground as well, to make sure that they can get a bigger ground like that.
Because that was the pushback of like, oh, why? We
want
to make sure we have a nice people there, but so why travel? But I do think it worked out, and so there's a possibility that this kind of trend continues. That way, you can put it in a Denver, or you can put it in a Atlanta. You can put it places where you want to grow the game.
Put it in where you have got a 12 or 15,000 seat stadium, something like that, and that fits well. So I'll have to try and find some highlights because it certainly looks low scoring. I don't think the score changed after about the 4th minute or something like that. So it was a
proper final.
It was a real grind.
Yeah.
It
was a proper final, and Seattle did have its moments. It came back in. I think they were scored and converted to go by Mac to go to 11. You thought, well, maybe it's on, but no. All season long, the team that had gone out quickly in the beginning kind of faded. So Houston almost got there and then faded right at the wrong time. And I feel like the Free Jacks just peaked at the right time.
Yeah. They timed their run, as they say in the parlances. We will be back with games of the week later in the week to kick off the Rugby Championship previews properly ahead of this weekend's games. And then the Test match post-mortem is back as well with our first thoughts on the first round of TRC matches before we really digest what happened. So make sure you have liked, follow, subscribe, and make sure you don't miss a minute throughout the tournament. Some headlines for the last 7 days to finish, mate, and it's a headline because, again, it was a bit of a disconnected week for me in terms of rugby news. And the big thing that I could see that sort of piqued my interest is the Sia Khaleesi situation. He could be back on his way back to South Africa. He's had crisis talks with Racing 92 in Paris. Didn't really resolve anything. The owner there is less than impressed, underwhelmed by his performance for his outlay. There was reports that the South African Union could maybe foot the sizable payout that Racing would want, but that was also quickly quashed. The union said that they weren't involved in any discussions in any way, which means they probably almost certainly are. How do you think that's going to play out?
He'll go to the Sharks. He's going to play with Ibn, his best mate, and they can renew their fascinating social media game. I love Ibn, Sia. Man love, bromance, talk. It's really funny. Jackie, the jack-off French owner, I'm just really down with these French owners, made a mistake because in the beginning it said Sia was really bringing people together and being really great off the field influence, and then he ended up calling him fat and invisible.
Yeah.
Sia's like, I don't know, he might be the second most social media followed rugby player, and he's like, I'm not standing for that, so I'm out. I'm not going to sit around and have some old fat owner call me fat. No, Sia looked fine playing in Ireland. He was up to it. I don't know what Jackie was thinking about. Yeah. He has form, that French owner. He kind of just talks about his players in a very demeaning way. I don't know how they get away with it. I guess he's a billionaire, so he can do it.
I've got a recollection of him not being a great fan of Kurtley Beale at one point. I'll stand corrected on that, but yeah.
No, there's several players if you go back through it, and even when he was shit talking Sia, he was doing the same thing to one of the Pacific Island guys. And I just think he's got this really weird, God complex. Anyway, he ran off one of his biggest draws. So
we'll see how it plays out, but it's hard to imagine that Khaleesi's playing another season in France after it's got to this point. So
no, he's definitely out. He's coming to the Sharks. So
revealed. Fair,
not exclusive.
Fair. It can be revealed. Not exclusive. I'm disappointed.
Not exclusive,
mate.
It's not exclusive.
I'm disappointed. You got a final thought for the week?
Oh, I'm writing an article right now. I think it's actually going to come up pretty soon, and it's about what Joe Schmidt must find, because I'm all about finding right now. And so I hope everyone's looking for that. I mean, I think Joe's got some time.
An 80-minute fetching on baller would be good.
Yeah, a lot of different sort of things he needs to find. And I think no one's looking for a miracle overnight. So this is actually a really intriguing matchup, because I think, again, it's like a time for a couple of players to make their name.
Yeah, no doubt. It will be interesting to see. It'd be fascinating to see how it plays out. I can't wait for the Rugby Championship to kick off this weekend, but we've got plenty to do to talk about it in between and afterwards as well. But that is episode 26 of the 8-9 Combo done. Do go and check the show notes for the links to the 8-9 Combo on Twitter and YouTube, where you'll find video versions of the podcast every week. Leave us a rating or review wherever you can. And if you subscribe to us on Spotify, jump into your settings and make sure auto download is on, and then you definitely will not miss an episode as well. Crucial. That's really, really handy for you to do. Harry and I remain on socials in our usual places at Harry Baldy Jones and at BMC Sport, and you'll find links on our socials and in the show notes as well to Harry's written works on the Raw and Demai Australian column on Rugby Pass as well. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed, coming from the podcast double act you already had. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones. And we'll be back in your ears later in the week with the Rugby Championship edition of Games of the Week.
Come play with us.
Yeah.